I think something that's really fascinating about this hearing and the topic of monopsony is that it really helps us address two really major economic forces at once. The first being stagnant wages in the face of rapidly rising costs of living. So we have people being squeezed on both sides with lower wages and higher costs. And today I want to kind of examine one of the driving underlying forces that allow this to happen so easily, which is corporate mergers.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
And an issue that lies directly at the root of both of these interconnected crises. So, Mr. Mitchell, I want to start by drawing a picture of corporate consolidation in the United States to see exactly how bad it's gotten. Let's take a share of the meat processing industry, for example. What's the market share? What is the current market share of the four largest companies in the meat processing industry?
The four largest companies account for just over 50%, so about 53% of the meat processing industry.
53% of all meat processing in the United States is handled by four companies.
Right.
I've got a visual right here so people understand. We've got JBS, Tyson, Cargill, and Smithfield. And when you go to the supermarket, no matter where you are in the United States, it boils down to pretty much four companies. Mr. Mitchell, let's now turn to retail. I'll provide the market share percentage for the four largest companies this time. It's 35% of all retail in the United States is run by four companies. And am I right to understand that Walmart and Amazon alone count for 2/3 of this cut?
That is correct. Walmart is about 14%, Amazon 10%.
So we've got about 1 in every 4 retail purchases, or we'll say in terms of the market, 1 in every 4 is run by 2 companies. Am I right? Okay.
That's correct.
Now, and I mean, I think it's a shocking degree to the amount and the control to which the volume of these industries are controlled by such a small group of corporations, and let alone people, when you look at who actually owns up stake in these companies. Now, a number of my colleagues and our witnesses today have rightly discussed the impact of corporate consolidation. When 4 companies control almost 60% of an industry, the normal supply-demand curve doesn't really set the price, does it?
It does not.
Wow.
So this whole idea of free markets and supply and demand and all of these things, that our prices are fair and price hikes are just the result of just completely natural, competitive environment, that starts to fall away when the US economy transforms into an oligopoly, isn't that right?
That is correct.
These are assertions of an actual free market with true competition. But when 4 companies run the show, we don't really have perfect competition, far from it, in our markets.
That's correct.
Now let's stick with the example of Walmart. Walmart has opened a number of supercenters across the country, displacing small to mid-sized retail companies in the surrounding region. Now, what does the latest economic research reveal about the impact of these supercenters on wages and aggregate employment? Sorry, Ms. Bond, my apologies.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is a really great study. What it does is look at the exact same places where a supercenter was proposed but blocked versus those that it was open. So we know they're pretty similar economies as each other. And when that happens, within 5 years, wages go down by 5.2%, employment decreases by 2.9%, and then labor force participation goes down by 1.4%. Simultaneously, Walmart's still there, so it's a bigger chunk of the labor market.
And so what we're seeing is that when a supercenter rolls into town and when a Walmart rolls into town, wages decrease and labor participation decreases.
Overall, there's just more dead weight loss in the economy. We're under potential.
And according to the Treasury Department, lack of competition in the labor market, in the job market, costs workers on average 15 to 25% of what they might otherwise make. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And so another way to put this too is that if a company cut wages by 5%, only around 10% of their staff would quit. So what they're doing basically is making a choice to reduce output, pay workers less because they have a higher profit rate, but they're actually suppressing economic activity broadly.
So when we see these huge companies gobble up massive parts of our market, we get that corporate consolidation leads to both increased prices and depressed wages. Is that what we're seeing from the data?
Exactly.
All right, thank you very much. I think as we look at, particularly when it comes to the issue of corporate consolidation, and we look at what industries are being consolidated, they're not ones that are exactly optional for Americans to participate in. Food, energy, transportation, communication, retail. And when we talk about the concentration of 4 major companies making up 53% of a market, we just talked through in how that can yield price increases. But I also want to focus on the other side of that, which is wage decreases. To preempt this idea, and I want to revisit something that Dr. Singer, you had just said, this idea that rising costs, this is why we're having record inflation right now, because wages are going up and gas prices are going up and supply chain issues. This is why we're seeing, food go up or general inflation rates going up 6%. And so, Dr. Singer, I'll just ask plainly, and this is something that Representative Jayapal had alluded to, the increases in costs that we're seeing right now, do those correlate with the increases in prices?
No, they don't. And I referenced in my testimony an analysis done by Josh Bivens at EPI that shows that there is no correlation in wage inflation and price inflation by industry, right? It's right there. So there's no correlation. But can I make just one other quick point? When it comes to pricing, a lot of these high fixed cost industries don't even take labor costs into consideration when formulating their price. I mean, think about, does the pharmaceutical company think about its labor expenses when it sets the price of the pill? Does a rental car company think about labor costs when it sets the price of a car? Does Google or Facebook think about labor costs when it sets the price of advertising? We're so far away from labor costs, and just a huge swath of the economy just is not even entering into the pricing calculus.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and as you mentioned earlier, there's a profound amount of overlap, and it's resonant with some of your experiences previously in studying and being involved in litigation with respect to cartels.
Oh, okay.
And when you look at the major areas and markets in the United States, 4 companies leading 53%, responsible for 53% of meat processing. This is a cartel. 80% of soybean processors, that's a cartel. 73% of beef processors, 4 companies, that's a cartel. And it may not be right in terms of the definition of the Sherman Act, but when we talk about that level of market consolidation, it may not be explicit. There may not be a written piece of paper saying we're going to set wages lower or set prices higher, but we all know what's going on here. And, so Ms. Bond, I want to focus on our solutions, how we fight back, because we have increases in prices and decreases in wages as a result of oligopolies and corporate consolidation.
What did he say?
So I want to focus on antitrust and unions as potential resolutions to this. Now, when we talk about unions, corporate consolidation effectively spreads this disease of eroded wages and work protections, but it also erodes the medicine, which is worker organizing. Can you briefly tell us why it's harder to organize a union with a multi-billion-dollar corporation like an Amazon or Starbucks?
Oh my.
Sure, I'll try to be as brief as I can. The first is union busting techniques. There's well documented that Amazon and other companies engage in union busting techniques. And the second is the current inadequacy of our protections against when companies engage in unfair labor practices, that the penalties are just not high enough, and firms don't have an incentive to comply with legal protections that workers are entitled to.
Yes.